Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to bring you what will surely be a lengthy June wrap-up. So much happened in June. It was Pride Month, so I read nothing but queer books. I finally got the chance to marathon through Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra like I've always wanted, thus changing my life forever. I also got to squeeze in some travel at the end of the month, so I did a lot of things and I read a lot of books. So let's just get into this. The first book I read in June was a long-standing request from my library, and I have no control over when those things come in, so this was one that I hadn't originally factored into my TBR for a reason, but that was The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This is about Molly, whose twin sister Cassie has just gotten an awesome new girlfriend, and while she's in the throes of young obsessive love, she decides that it's her life's mission to find Molly someone to date. So while Cassie is working on this setup, Molly actually starts a new job and ends up falling for her cute, nerdy coworker. Now, Molly has never really had any romantic prospects before, let alone two at once, so her life is about to get very messy. First, I just want to clarify that this is not queer lit. It is not, but it is extremely queer friendly and offers a ton of valuable representation within the supporting cast. This book pleasantly surprised me. It ended up being a really engaging story that I inhale read over a period of less than 24 hours. I was so invested that I could not turn away. It's a super sweet romance, and you get to witness as Molly, an explicitly fat character with anxiety, goes on this really great journey of self-love paralleled with her first experience with romantic love. But it's also connected with the scariness of growing up and feeling powerless as things in your life start to change, how the different relationships in your life, be they platonic, romantic, familial, or friendly, will inevitably change over time, especially as you bring new people into those dynamics. This book is a love letter to insecure girls everywhere, girls who are constantly told in so many ways that they are not enough, not pretty enough, not interesting enough, not thin enough, not trying enough. It's just baseless, negative garbage that piles up and that you can't help but internalize. It's enough to make you want to give up entirely until all you know is fear, because suddenly you're in your own head, you're in your own way. This story is for any girl who's been conditioned to feel that way about herself. It says it's possible to take risks and to take chances, to try for something, because sometimes it'll work out and sometimes it'll blow up in your face, and that's okay. I really dug this story. It hit me in so many ways and spoke to me on a personal level. I think Becky Albertalli has solidified herself as one to watch with this book, and I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read Any Way the Wind Blows by Carlin Grant. This is a queer novella featuring an aromantic, asexual character, its own voices about this nomadic farmer named Callie who travels across the country trading labor for food and lodging. At her latest stop, she really grows close to this mechanic named Joe, but she turns out to be the sister of Callie's current boss. I went into this one mostly for the validation, and it was great to see a character explicitly describe herself as aromantic, actually to read that word on the page and to sit with what it means to this person. Overall, I don't have much to say about this though, because it was extremely short, obviously, which I think worked against it because it felt really rushed and underdeveloped, and I think there were a lot of moments that felt really cheesy and hokey just because there wasn't enough. I just really wanted the story to focus on this unique dynamic between Joe and Callie, which is not defined by romantic or sexual attraction, which is deeply platonic in a way that we pretty much never get to see in fiction, and I just didn't get enough of that. With that said, I'm glad I read this. I'm glad it's out there. It had some good moments, good instances of representation, but it's not a story that I'm overly enthusiastic about, truth be told, so I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read The Edge of the Abyss by Emily Skretski. This is the sequel to The Abyss Surrounds Us, which takes place in a future where the world as we know it has been divided and the seas have become treacherous and overtaken by pirates. To combat this, scientists have created reckoners, which are huge genetically modified sea monsters designed to imprint on humans and function as trained weapons. Our main character, Cass, was a former reckoner trainer who went on her first solo mission only to be captured by pirates, and this sequel continues to follow her as she gets further tied up in reckoner warfare and pirate politics. Just like the first book, within 1 or 2 pages I was completely invested and engaged in this story, and this duology continues to pleasantly surprise me with its high level of commentary and awareness. This sequel continues to explore how the people with all the resources, privilege, and advantages are seen as innocent, while the people on the seas, people fighting to live, survive, and provide after being forced into less than ideal situations by choices that are not really choices, are seen as villainous. You also see Swift and Cass really going through it. There was some major stuff that happened in book 1 where Swift betrayed and hurt Cass in really big ways. I like that Cass sticks to her guns and realizes that they can't be together until they heal, and they struggle through that, taking one small step forward only to uncover 5 new problems, and they have to realize that there is something there worth fighting for, and that they have to work their way through that pain if they want to find a new balance. And that was shown in a very realistic way. That said, the ending of this duology was supremely unsatisfying, and I think that's because the author didn't really know where the story was going or how to end it, which honestly I felt bleeding through most of the book. Because of that, the climax and resolution of this story are montaged over, which is a definite pet peeve of mine, and I also felt like the primary antagonist in this duology was dealt with in a really unsatisfying way as well. Even taking that into account, I couldn't give this any less than 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps by Kai Ashante Wilson. This is Own Voices. It's about a demigod turned human who now uses his power only to heal, which has earned him the label of sorcerer among his men. He is undyingly loyal to another descendant of gods, the captain, who is leading a caravan of men from the northern oasis to the southern kingdom. However, the only direct path there is being terrorized by a vicious creature, and many travelers have already disappeared or been killed, so the sorcerer may have to summon his true power in all its dangerous glory to not only grant his companions safe passage, but to protect the man he loves. I honestly feel like I'm nowhere near intelligent enough to fully explain all the ways this book succeeds. This story exemplifies a mastery of language. There's such an effortless blend of eloquent, elevated language met with deconstructed, casual, modern language and slang. There are smatterings of French, Spanish, other dialects, and made-up languages, and it all coexists so comfortably within these pages. There's no explanation for why the language is this way, and there doesn't have to be, and because you have no other choice, you slowly start to see how it all works. Also, just the theme of non-human beings struggling to hold on to their humanity while being forced into situations where their otherworldly powers become a necessity is one of my favorite things to read about. Here you have a character who works so hard to be good enough, to use his powers only for good, never for violence or destruction, and yet when his caravan and captain are in danger, his past and his powers are something he has to reconcile and face. Not to mention the irrepressible, incandescent way Damane loves the captain is so pure and so strong. Reading about it was like looking straight into the sun, and it just made me feel so much. Incredibly written, unforgettable, powerful. I loved it. There was literally nothing that I didn't like about this, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read the newly released Raven Stratagem by Yoon Ha Lee. This is the much-awaited sequel to Nine Fox Gambit, a sci-fi story about a soldier named Kel Chetis who is ordered to share her body with the undead soul of a fiendish tactician and possible madman named Shuos Jideo as they try to reclaim a key fortress overtaken by heretics. I love this so much. It's a sequel worthy of its predecessor. I knew within the first paragraph that this was gonna be a fucking ride, and it was. The stakes are higher than ever in this installment, and I just love the scope of it. You get to read from the perspective of delegates within the Hexarchate, and you get more of an inside look at how all these different factions are reacting to the war with the heretics, the effects of calendrical rot, and how they think they should deal with Chetis and Jideo, who have gone rogue and are putting their own mysterious plans into effect. This story also gives you a better understanding of the heretics and their style of warfare, and it gets you thinking about how maybe the other side of this war could be locked into their own version of formation instinct. They may be reacting within the very literal limits of their social or governmental laws. This sequel also continues to challenge gender in the most satisfying way. For example, the line between Chetis and Jideo is pretty much obliterated, so here you have someone in what is called a woman-form body being referred to as Jideo and with he, him, his pronouns. That's such a small thing, but it really forces the reader to decouple these false, arbitrary connections that we make between bodies and certain kinds of pronouns. That's really important. There's also multitudes of supporting characters who in their POV sections explore many different experiences with woman form, man form, and all different kinds of identities and pronouns. It is beautiful to witness. I loved this, to say the least, and I gave it 5 stars. My poetry collection for the month of June was Indian Cartography by Deborah A. Miranda. Deborah A. Miranda is a queer Native author. She is part of the Esselen Nation primarily, and she uses this collection almost like a memoir where she takes you through the different stages of her life with a focus on her childhood and how that affected her growing up as she transitioned into adulthood. I felt really close to this collection because I had previously read her memoir, Bad Indians, which is an exceptional piece that effortlessly blends together the historical and factual with the modern and personal. So having read that before, I felt like I had more insight to some of these poems. As always, Miranda's voice is so refreshing. She brings so much clarity to each piece, but there's a real openness to her approach where she's writing not because she has all the answers, but because she's still struggling to figure things out. She's writing to uncover the truth, to write herself into existence. And though this collection has several pieces about her Native heritage, that's not the focus here, and it doesn't have to be. Miranda shows that just by writing about her life and her experiences while being a Native person, she's demystifying what it means to be Native in the modern world. She's sharing her own facets of her own Native experience and redefining what that can look like. This was a fantastic collection, and I gave it 4 stars. After that, I finally read Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. This is Own Voice's queer Asian fiction about a character named Jess who is the daughter of 2 small-time but powerful superheroes and yet displays no signs of superpowers herself. Wanting to do something on her own, she accepts a paid internship at a company run by a notorious supervillain and her parents' arch nemesis. But the upside is that she gets to work alongside Abby, her longtime crush. This book is amazing. Not only does it have a super satisfying slow burn romantic build, not only is it set in a really fascinating futuristic world where superpowers are commonplace, but it is an impeccable social commentary. Yes. In this world, you see how privilege is disseminated through the classification of superpowers. Those with the most significant marketable powers like super strength or flying are backed by the most resources, they're taken care of by the government, they're assigned to the wealthiest cities, which they argue are bigger targets for bigger crimes. But you also get to see that the most famous, most well-loved and respected superheroes are white. There's a really sharp contrast when it comes to Jess's parents, who are Vietnamese and Chinese immigrants, and their powers are somewhere in the middle, which is why they're in more of an ordinary suburban kind of area where their nemesis is essentially a glorified prankster. And the story also explores how those in power are the ones who get to decide how the narrative of history is told, and how anyone who goes against the ones with the power and privilege are going to be seen as villainous, whether warranted or not. This story is phenomenal, and while I did find some of the big reveals to be really predictable really early on, I still love this more than I can say. I gave this book 4.5 stars. And finally, I read Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller. This is an upcoming queer YA fantasy about a gender-fluid thief named Sal who is looking to leave behind the world of small crime by auditioning to become one of the Queen's personal assassins. If they can do this, they will finally have the means to put into motion a larger plan involving revenge. Trigger warnings for misgendering both accidentally and on purpose. This was a very disappointing, unsatisfactory story for me. Not only did it leave me feeling unimpressed, but it made me feel cheated in more than one way. I don't want to say too much here because I do plan on doing a full spoiler-free discussion where I can better hash out the very complex conversations surrounding representation, marketing, target audience, a lack of other gender-fluid characters in the mainstream market, etc. But while the representation was not productive in my eyes, a bigger part of why I didn't like this book was the story itself. This feels like a run-of-the-mill YA fantasy set in a very generic world, and the way this life and death competition is set up does this story no favors in terms of character growth, character relationships, or even generating suspense. The best way I can describe my experience with this book is that it made me feel nothing. I was not excited, I was not on the edge of my seat, I was not even engaged with the characters or the story, and that's because I've seen so many versions of this book in the past. And as a queer, non-binary reader, it really makes me question whether this story has been pushed so strongly simply because it has a gender-fluid character and because that's part of the tagline. And like I said, there's a lot there to unpack. But I was definitely not a fan of this one. I will not be getting a finished copy. I gave this 2 stars. Stay tuned for more thoughts. At long last, those are all the books I read in June. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these, if you plan to, or let me know what were some of your favorite favorite things that you read or experienced in the month of June. But that is everything I had for this wrap up today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye.